Today I'm going to be reading the legend of St Egwin and the foundation of Evesham Abbey, a famous English monastery located near Worcester. This is a great little account with a couple of good legends at the end that really seem to have kick-started his cult. So here it is, the legend of St Egwin and the foundation of Evesham Abbey. St Egwin, third Bishop of Worcester, was born about the middle of the 7th century. He was of high birth, related to the royal family of Mercia. From his earliest days he devoted himself to religion, renouncing the desire of worldly honours and the enjoyment of temporal prosperity. He embraced voluntarily poverty for the love of God, giving himself up to ecclesiastical studies and to the offices of religion. The minor orders were still in use in England. Egwin passed step by step through them to the priesthood, and when the see of Worcester became vacant on the death of Bishop Ofthor around 693, the clergy and also the people were urgent that he should be raised to the episcopal dignity. The King of Mercia, Ethelred, heartily concurred, and so Egwin, though sorely against his will, was made Bishop of Worcester. Straightway, we are told, he became a famous preacher of the divine word, hoping thereby to save the souls of his people. The English in the Midlands were still but half weaned from the old heathen ways. Many evil customs yet lingered amongst them. St Egwin, in his zeal to eradicate these errors, often preached against them, sharply rebuking his flock for their wicked and erroneous practices and unlawful marriages, which he prohibited them to contract in the future, reproving, entreating, rebuking in all patience and doctrine. Such plain speaking was not likely to meet with popular approval. St Egwin's preaching gave great offence. Some of the nobles, whose practice was not in accordance with their profession, became his bitter enemies. So it came to pass before long that a storm of opposition was raised against him. The populace joined in the outcry, and St Egwin was driven out of Worcester. The king himself connived at this injurious treatment of him, for Egwin's enemies had taken care to poison his mind against him. In this distress, the man of God, perceiving himself to be called to the conflict, clothed himself with the armour of faith, and supported himself with the divine consolations. Conscious of his innocence in respect of these charges laid against him, yet not doubting of his sinfulness in the sight of God, he determined to make a penitential journey to Rome, which he also did, occupying himself the whole of the way thither in prayer and fasting, daily humbling himself in the sight of God. In this mind and spirit he entered Rome, where he met with the most gracious and honourable reception. Old writers attribute this gracious reception to a miracle said to have occurred on the way, or soon after his arrival in Rome. It seems more probable that the story of his wrongs had become known in Rome, and Egwin met with that sympathy and honour which is due from all good Christians to those who suffer in a righteous cause. St Egwin made some short stay abroad. In the meantime, a great change of opinion occurred at home. Scarcely, indeed, was he removed from the sight of his people, when they began to regret their treatment of him, none more so than the king, who was heartily ashamed of the weak part which he had played. So it came to pass that St Egwin returned to England. He met with a welcome, and was joyfully received back without any opposition into his diocese. The king shortly afterwards chose him to be his spiritual father, and confided the princes, his sons, to the care for instruction in letters and moral culture. In the time of his adversity and exile, the saint had made a vow to God that if ever he should be freed from his misfortunes, he would build as a thanks offering a house of religion. Finding himself now in great prosperity, he began to consider how he could best fulfill this vow. Many valuable estates of land were about this time conferred upon him. One of these was at Flanbury, which he exchanged for another at Stratford. Among the rest was an extensive tract of land, then called Heathhome, given him by Kendred, King of Mercia, who had lately succeeded his uncle Ethelred. This contained about 80 manses of healthy land, situated on either side of the river Avon. On it stood a little old British church, a relic of times past. St Egwin took great interest in this church, which he frequented much for private devotion, and eventually he decided to build his abbey here. In the meantime, until his plans could be matured, he placed 4 herdsmen on the estate to farm it. The chief of them, whose name was Oves, lived upon it. From him the place came to be called Oversholme, which in time became abbreviated to Evesham, and it remains its name to the present day. The new abbey was consecrated in AD 709 and was dedicated to the Virgin Mary. It was a grand foundation for these times, and at once took a place among the chief religious houses of the Midlands of England. It happened, soon after the completion of the building, that King Kenred resigned his throne from religious motives and, contemplating a visit to Rome, requested St Egwin, who had travelled that way before, to accompany him. Egwin complied, and took advantage of his stay in Rome to attain a valuable charter of privileges for his new foundation. This charter of privileges, we are expressly told, he submitted on his return home to the civil and ecclesiastical authorities, by whom it was confirmed. St Egwin in his latter years retired from his episcopate into his abbey. There he devoted himself to the spiritual training of his new community and in pious preparation for his own death. For this, Bishop Egwin, says the old writer, was a very holy confessor, humble in his demeanour, cheerful in conversation, devout as a preacher, candid in judgment, of reverend life, very watchful in prayer, assiduous in reading, pious in affections, and remarkable for many miracles. When at last he fell into a chronic illness, he ceased not night and day from the praise of God, and such works as he could not now perform himself, he caused to be done by others. He departed to the Lord on the 3rd of the calends of January, about AD 717, and was buried in his abbey at Evesham. Evesham Abbey flourished exceedingly after St Egwin's death. Its monks were in high repute for their holiness of lives, and were sought when any good work of difficulty had to be accomplished. When Ethelbold, King of Mercia, founded Croyland Abbey, he committed the care of it and the training of the new community to the monks of Evesham, and later on, when Christian teachers were required for Denmark, where a certain King Eric had become favourable to Christianity, he was supplied with missionaries from Evesham. The abbot of Evesham was mitred and sat with the peers of England. St Egwin's church fell into decay, of course, in time, but was magnificently rebuilt after the Norman conquest, and must have been a grand building. Inside were 16 chapels with altars to respective saints. The cloisters of the abbey were supported upon 164 gilt marble pillars. Many curious old legends are told of St Egwin. The most noted of these is connected with his penitential pilgrimage to Rome. It is told variously in particulars by different writers, but all agree in the main story. It is given thus by William of Malmesbury. St Egwin, in penitence for his own sins and for those of his people, fettered his legs together with chains of iron. These he locked together and then threw the key into the river Avon, declaring publicly that he would ever be bound by these fetters unless he were freed from them by God, or unless they were unlocked by the same key which had fastened them on his legs. Thus bound, he set out on his journey for Rome. On the way, as he was crossing the sea between France and England, a great fish leaped into the ship, which the sailors caught, and in its inside the key was found. All were astonished, he continues, none more so than the man of God, who, however, submitting to the divine will, accepted the key in the presence of them all, and unlocked his chains. The fame of this wondrous event soon spread everywhere, and filled all Rome. In another legend, his choice for Heathholm for the abbey which he was going to build is attributed to the following vision. Oves, the herdsman, having lost a sow, sought her a long time among the thickets. After some months, continuing his search, he penetrated further into the wood, and there beheld a vision of 3 virgins whose radiance, brighter than the sun, nearly blinded his eyes. Returning hastily home, Oves reported what he had seen to the bishop, who, after some time spent in prayer and fasting, repaired to the spot, where he beheld the same vision. By this the man of God understood that this spot should be consecrated for the worshippers of God, and that it should be dedicated to the Virgin Mary. Thanks for watching. If you like what we're doing, or if you want to help support our mission, please don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope to see you again soon. Benedicat vos, omnipotens Deus, Pater et Filius et Spiritus Sanctus. Amen.